Pop albums have always been called good or bad, iconic or forgettable. But what if we judged them by something far more dangerous than a critic's opinion? 7 heavenly virtues, 7 deadly sins, 1 album for each. And by the end of this video, you'll never hear these albums the same way again. In pop music, albums aren't just music, they're character statements. Every rollout, every visual, every single choice an artist makes before a note even plays tells you exactly who they think they are. And sometimes that self-image matches what fans see, and sometimes it doesn't. 7 battles, 14 albums. Starting with the virtue that the biggest pop stars forget the fastest, humility. And its far more dangerous opposite, pride. At a point when most artists chase the biggest studio and the biggest budget, Billie Eilish recorded her debut album in her childhood bedroom. No celebrity producers, no elaborate sessions, just Billie and her brother Phineas, a laptop, a microphone, and a bedroom with foam panels on the walls. She was 17 years old. The album won all 4 major Grammy categories simultaneously. Album, record, song of the year, and best new artist. No artist in Grammy history had ever done that before. Not one. And it was built in a bedroom. One fan wrote, "Billie didn't perform greatness. She just made something honest, and somehow that was greater than everything else." Humility didn't limit her, it made her untouchable. But not every artist understands that lesson. Some look at success and decidedly simply cannot fail. The rollout began with a video of Justin Timberlake standing in a forest in a flannel shirt talking about nature and authenticity. "I've been connected to nature my whole life." The internet didn't take it seriously. Man of the Woods arrived with one of the most self-important promotional campaigns in modern pop history, and a Super Bowl halftime show that reignited the Janet Jackson conversation had avoided for 14 years. Critics called the album disconnected, fans called it confusing. It debuted at number 1 and disappeared within weeks. One fan wrote, "He convinced himself this was his most personal era. The problem is, nobody else felt it." Humility built a bedroom album that won every Grammy that existed. Pride built a forest era that nobody remembers. Some artists sell fans an album, others build them an entire world. Future nostalgia arrived in March 2020. Wigs into a global pandemic, no concerts, no promotional tour, no way to celebrate it the way it deserved. And yet, it gave millions of people locked inside their homes something they desperately needed. Joy. Pure, uninterrupted, disco pop joy. Don't Start Now. Levitating. Physical. Songs that didn't ask anything from the listener except to feel good for 3 minutes. In the darkest year of a generation, that was the most generous thing a pop artist could have done. One fan wrote, "Future nostalgia saved my pandemic. I don't say that lightly. But not every artist gives. Some calculate." When Justice released in March 2021, the rollout immediately raised questions, multiple album variants, excessive reissues with additional tracks added in waves, an album title that borrowed the language of social justice movements in a way critics called commercially calculated. To frustrated fans, the era felt less like an artistic statement and more like a machine running at full speed for reasons that had nothing to do with music. One critic wrote, "Justice is an album that knows exactly how to look meaningful without the effort of being meaningful. Charity built a world for fans during a crisis. Greed built a product dressed as a cause." The difference between the two is something the audience always feels, even when they can't explain why. In pop music, attention is currency, and most artists spend it loudly. Olivia Rodrigo spent none of it. Soar arrived with no provocative visuals, no shocking performances, no controversy manufactured to generate clicks. Just an 18-year-old and songs that cut directly to the bone. Driver's License. Deja Vu. Good for You. Soar became the fastest-selling debut by a female artist in Spotify history. Not because of spectacle, because of truth, one fan wrote, "I didn't follow Olivia Rodrigo because she was famous. I followed her because she said exactly what I was feeling, and I couldn't figure out how she knew." Restraint, it turns out, is one of the loudest things a pop artist can choose. Then there's the opposite approach entirely. In August 2013, Miley Cyrus performed at the MTV Video Music Awards in a moment that generated more immediate media coverage than almost any pop performance of that decade. Bangerz arrived weeks later, Wrecking Ball, We Can't Stop, an era built deliberately around provocation, a total image transformation from Hannah Montana thought was designed to cause reaction for Stan deliver music second. The question Bangerz still resistant whether it was shocking. It obviously was. The question is whether the shock helped the music or permanently became louder than it, one fan wrote. I remember exactly what Miley wore at the VMAs. I had to look up the track list. That's the risk of lust over craft. The image consumes the art. The greatest pop stars know they didn't appear from nowhere. Harry Styles has never pretended otherwise. Harry's house openly credited Joni Mitchell as its primary inspiration. He acknowledged his influences publicly, without hesitation, without ego. The album title itself was a statement. A home built for his fans, not a monument built for himself. Harry's house won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year in 2023. One fan wrote, Harry didn't act like he invented a new kind of music. He just loved his influences loudly enough that we loved them too. Gratitude builds something real. Envy builds something that only looks real until you look closer. June 2010, Lady Gaga's The Fame Monster was dominating pop music globally. And then Christina Aguilera released Bionic, a heavily electronic album that critics immediately and consistently compared to Gaga's sonic landscape. The similarities weren't subtle. Bionic's sold 114,000 copies in its first week. The worst debut of Christina Aguilera's career, one critic wrote, Bionic sounds less like Christina Aguilera's reinvention and more like her response to someone else's. Now, the fairest question here is this: was it inspiration? Was it coincidence? Or was it an artist watching someone else dominate the space she had occupied and making a desperate move to reclaim it? That question has never been fully answered. But the sales answered something. The hardest word in pop music might be enough. Lorde said it at 16 years old better than most artists manage across an entire career. Pure heroine. 10 tracks. 0 features. No excessive production. No filler included to inflate a streaming count. Every song earned its place. Royals became a global hit from a teenager in New Zealand who simply refused to add anything the album didn't need. One fan wrote, Pure Heroine sounds like one who knew exactly what she was making and didn't let anyone talk her out of it. That clarity is rarer than talent. And then there are albums that simply refuse to stop. 19 tracks. 78 minutes, the first 7. Aggressive rap that showcased exactly why Nicki Minaj was the most dominant female rapper alive. The final 10. Disconnected dance pop that felt like a completely different album had been stapled to the back without warning. Critics didn't just call it excessive, they called it confused. One fan wrote, Roman Reloaded has 2 incredible albums inside it. Unfortunately, they're both trapped inside one exhausting one, and that's the real question Gluttony always raises. Could a focused 12-track album have been hiding inside this Oni entire time? Almost certainly. Pop fans are terrible at waiting. Sometimes artists are even worse, but occasionally, patience creates something impossible to rush. In 2016, Selena Gomez stepped away from music entirely. A lupus diagnosis, a kidney transplanted by her best friend Francia Reza, a psychiatric facility stay she discussed publicly without shame, 4 years of silence. Rare arrived in January 2020 and became her first #1 album, not because it was the loudest thing in pop music that year, because it was the most honest, one fan wrote. Rare sounds like one who came back only when she had something real to say, and you can hear that in every song. Patience gave her something no amount of rushing ever could, the right moment, and then there's the other side. What happens when an artist doesn't wait for the pain to pass, but records it before it does? Payne wrote Funhouse during her divorce from Carrie Hart, every track fueled by a specific anger. So what? Sober. Funhouse. She didn't disguise what the album was made from, she announced it. And what came out wasn't a revenge fantasy, it was something more complicated. Wrath turned inward, wrath turned outward. And somewhere in between, some of the most honest pop music of that entire decade. One fan wrote, Funhouse doesn't sound like an album about divorce. It sounds like divorce itself, which is exactly why it hit so hard. Can anger create great art? Piank answered that question in 2008. Some albums sound expensive, others sound exhausting. In 1998, Madonna was 40 years old. at a point when most artists at her level coast on the legacy they've already built. She spent an entire year studying electronic music production with producer William Orbit, not collaborating from a distance, studying. From the beginning, she rebuilt her sound from scratch. Ray of Light won 4 Grammy Awards, and it permanently settled a question the music industry didn't even know it was asking. Can an artist reinvent themselves completely at 40 years old if the work is genuine? Madonna answered that question by doing the work when nobody asked her to. One fan wrote, "Ray of Light didn't sound like Madonna keeping up. It sounded like Madonna leading again, because she put in the time to earn it." Diligence turned one album into a monument, and then there's the opposite. The Dutchess in 2006 was enormous. London Bridge, glamorous. Big Girls Don't Cry, an album that made Fergie one of the most commercially successful solo debuts off that decade. Double Dutchess arrived 11 years later, 9 tracks, a rollout that felt disconnected from anything happening in pop music. Critics didn't call it offensive, they called it forgettable, which in pop music is the more brutal verdict. Fans who had been waiting over a decade to felt the album had forgotten why it was supposed to exist. One fan wrote, "Double Dutchess didn't feel lazy in an obvious way. It felt lazy in the saddest way, like someone going through the motions off something they used to care about." Diligence made Madonna a monument at 40. Sloth made a decade of waiting feel like it had never happened at all. 7 battles, 14 albums. And here's what all of them tell us. When you look at the full picture, the Heavenly albums, Billie's bedroom record, Dua Lipa's Pandemic Gift, Olivia's Unfiltered debut, Harry's Grateful Reinvention, Lorde's Restrained Masterpiece, Selena's Honest Comeback, Madonna's Disciplined Transformation, none of them were trying to be legendary. They were trying to be true. And the Sinful albums, Justin's Forest Fantasy, Bieber's Calculated Era, Miley's Provocative Reinvention, Christina's Desperate Pivot, Nicki's Bloated Double Album, Rage-Fueled Masterpiece. Wait, NK's album is in the Sinful category, and it's one of the most powerful albums in this entire list, which might be the most important thing this video reveals. The Sins aren't always wrong. Wrath produced Funhouse. Lust produced songs people still play a decade later. Even Pride produces #1s before the audience moves on. The difference between the Heavenly and the Sinful albums isn't quality, it's intention. The Heavenly albums put the music first. The Sinful albums put something else first. Ego, provocation, commerce, imitation, and hoped the music would be enough. Sometimes it was. Usually it wasn't. And we haven't even touched the pop artists, whose entire careers swung between Heavenly and Sinful in ways nobody saw coming. Click the video on screen now to see the albums that made fans worship or reject the biggest names in pop music history.